a bit chilly here. Just to take extra precautions to make sure that Steve and McQueen don't escape, because I have worn this dress many times before and believe me, they're always trying to escape. We are about to embark upon a journey. A long journey. You probably won't feel the same afterwards, but it's going to be fun at least. So this video is about season 1 of the CW show Reign. I was curious about this show for a while, but not enough to actually seek it out until it became necessary for this channel. I honestly thought this was just another fantasy series that came out in the early mid-2010s to sort of cash in on Game of Thrones, but have a more female-centric fan base, or audience even. I had no idea this was about Mary Queen of Scots until a much later time, because you wouldn't have known straight away just looking at some of these stills. Would you have guessed that this was set anywhere else other than some fantasy universe? I went into this series kind of with the same mindset I have currently got towards Blood, Sex and Royalty, where I was going to think, oh god, this is going to be awful. In the case of Blood, Sex and Royalty, it is awful. But with CW's Reign, the show is bad in terms of how many historical inaccuracies there are. But funnily enough, there were some things that were really enjoyable, and even though a lot of the events of season 1 are fictional, a lot of it's quite enjoyable after a little while. So if you haven't watched the series yet, this is your spoiler warning. I've only watched season 1, I have not seen anything of season 2 except for maybe a couple stills, or season 3 or 4, although pretty much we know what's going to happen anyway because this is Mary Queen of Scots, it can only end one way. And I must ask that no one spoil the events of what's to come in the comments for me or for anyone watching this, because being surprised is part of the fun of watching this show. It is just that crazy. I'm going to go through a quick summary of what happens in each episode. And yes, I'm going to change people's names because if the series can do it, so can I.
The actors are prepared. The stage is set. Please enjoy the pilot.
Mary Queen of Scots goes to the French court after living at the sisterhood of the arse end of nowhere of our perpetual sorrow. She is engaged to the Dauphin of France named Francois. Nostradamus predicts Mary will cause Francois' death. Her 4 ladies in waiting show up: Kenna, Amy, Susan and Germaine. Francois' older brother is a bastard, literally and figuratively, and he's called
Unemployed Brendan.
Susan's boyfriend Colin shows up and is ordered by Catherine de Medici to give Mary the hot Cosby. This fails, he's killed. Kenna has a finger party for one. King Henri II of France gate crashes.
What do you call that thing on the branch?
Branch monster.
Please, call me Snake. Yo, have you dudes sampled this fruit?
Colin is not dead. They killed the wrong dude. The race is on to find him, but the Hydra agents who live in the woods and worship the Chupacabra get to him first. Unemployed Brendan chants a little so they can claim the body. Some English Berks, headed by Simon, Prince of Berks, shows up at court to intimidate Mary. Mary finds out there's someone who lives in the walls named Clarissa, or to give her her full name, Clarissa Bertha Erica Jasona Mason Voorhees, of the opera.
Hey! You two should kiss!
The girls are talking about their first kisses. Germaine has her sights on another bastard, named Thomas of Portugal. England are intimidating the Scots on the English boulder. And Mary asks Henri for help. He refuses. Francois convinces him to change his mind and sends unemployed Brendan to gather the troops. The English come out of Calais and unemployed Brendan limps home. Mary realises she'll have to marry Thomas to get Portugal to help. Germaine has a pity picnic with a servant named Blonde Xander, also known as Riley Finn, and they have a snog. Nostradamus has a prediction that Aston Villa and Leyton Orient will have a match at the Memorial Ground, which makes no sense because those teams aren't in the same league.
I used to love you, but it was all in my head and my heart, and now those are empty.
Turns out we should have called Thomas Prince Hans, because he turns on a dime and threatens Mary before they're even married. Dumb move there. Everyone works out he tipped off the English so Mary would marry him. He is killed. Kenna becomes Henri II's mistress.
You can feel the chill in the air.
Francois's ex comes back to court and stirs up jealousy between Francois and Mary. Germaine decides to date Riley in secret, although she should really keep an eye on this guy called Lord Castleroy, because even though he talks about Pepper, Germaine is bloody Scottish and she should know that haggis goes great with pepper. Mary shares a beer with unemployed Brendan and they snog. Not knowing that Francois saw the whole thing, unemployed Brendan pisses off the Hydra agents again by taking a sacrifice before he died.
I have been chosen. Farewell, my friends. I go on to a better place.
Hydra marks Mary for death, doing an homage to the Godfather on the way. Catherine de Medici ain't having that, and she threatens monarchical arson if no one fesses up. Turns out a maid and a guard are secret Hydra agents who infiltrated the castle. Unemployed Brendan finds a patsy to draw out the agents and kills one of them, then kills the patsy. Kenna tells her friends that she's the king's mistress, but Diane de Poitiers is still hanging around. Francois has his first breakup with Mary and rebounds with his ex. Despite the title, the rapture has nothing to do with it. Instead, the Italians take over the castle and hold everyone hostage. What kind of Italians? They never say, even though Italy is a bunch of smaller states at this point and not a whole bloody country. Francois offers himself as a hostage. Catherine and Mary decide to truce to evacuate the castle. Kenna is threatened and gets beaten pretty badly. Mary kills someone for the first time using Chekhov's fork. Germaine and Riley kill one of the soldiers. Francois's ex disappears, but he doesn't care because he then has thank God we're alive sex with Mary.
Oh my god. What? I've got some fucking Jaffa cakes in my coat pocket. Oh!
Mary finds out about Nostradamus' prophecy. Amy dies. Mary and unemployed Brendan run away in broad daylight. Mary and unemployed Brendan get captured and return to court. Francois beats the hell out of him. Mary proposes marrying unemployed Brendan via legitimising him. Catherine ain't having none of that, but then she gets locked up. Henri goes to Rome to annul his marriage, and Francois decides he's had enough of this bollocks and leaves. Nostradamus gets shanked in the neck, but don't worry, he got better.
I guess when you have a family, that's the sacrifice you make.
Sacrifice, exactly. I sacrificed. The ultimate sacrifice. My happiness. For my kids.
Unemployed Brendan briefly becomes employed Brendan, and he sucks at it. His pregnant cousin is brought in, which could spill the beans on his pagan roots. He and Mary sneak her out, but she goes into labour in the woods, and she has to give birth while Hydra is closing in. Then she promptly dies. Catherine realises she's underestimated everyone loyal to Mary and vows never to make that mistake again.
The Inquisition, what a show, the Inquisition, here we go.
Sadly, there's nothing Spanish about it. Henri can't annul his marriage, so he decides to have Catherine de Medici executed for adultery. Turns out she's already guilty of it because, guess what, Clarissa is actually a secret bastard conceived with Henri's best friend. She tries to drown Mary, fails spectacularly, and gets locked up again. How's she gonna get out of this one? Catherine's two younger sons are kidnapped, apart from the third one, who is actually 2 years old at the moment and is nowhere to be seen. Turns out this was unemployed Brendan's idea, which can't possibly go wrong. I mean, name a time when two disinherited princes were separated from their mother and it didn't go swimmingly. Alan, don't headbutt the microphone, what are you doing? Speaking of swimmingly, now they're in danger because Clarissa pulled a sideshow Bob and now she wants to drown the princes in the pond. Mary caves her head in with a rock. Meanwhile, Susan goes to Paris to bail out her brother, Edmund, and runs into Francois. Things happen. Then on their way out, Francois finds out his mother's going to be executed.
Not only that, it is said to greatly increase one's sexual appetite.
I got news for you. Come the morning, you're going to be starving.
Catherine de Medici rehearses her own execution because she's just that extra.
When can we talk about my tomb?
A Florentine sculptor, 20 tons of marble. I can't afford it. After the 100 musicians, the dozen ships made of silver and gold.
Symbolic of my journey to heaven.
Nostradamus realises he got the prophecy wrong because if Clarissa is dead, Mary's already caused the death of Catherine's firstborn. Marie de Guise shows up unannounced. Mary and unemployed Brendan attempt an elopement, but Francois intercedes. Catherine gives Mary her blessing in a super sweet way. Mary and Francois then get married, and Catherine is freed. But then Nostradamus finds out that Clarissa isn't dead. So the prophecy's back on, people. Unemployed Brendan runs off into the night, now a wanted fugitive.
Those your sheets, honey? Was it the dream about the clowns again?
It's been 2 months and it's still snowing. Definitely filmed in Canada. This happens. Catherine and Henri get up to shenanigans covering it up. All we're missing is a laughter track.
I know, she's heavier than she looked.
Susan realises she's preggo. She attempts to abort but is saved at the last minute by Mary. Unemployed Brendan hooks up with Sophia from Rise of the Tomb Raider. And Francois's ex shows up out of the woods. Mary finds a suitor for Susan, but he's gay. Lord Carteroy shows up again to court Germaine. She arranges for Riley to get an apprenticeship that'll take him away from court. Turns out her family have arranged a match for her. Let's see how well that'll go. Kenna has a threesome, but the third member is strangled. Catherine covers it up. Sophia gets fridged by the chupacabra.
What are you doing down here in the realm of the month? Just pick an eye, babe. I can't concentrate on what I'm saying if you keep... Yep, pick one. Pick one.
Henri has lost it. A servant girl wins a Queen for the Day prize and she is a total chav. Nostradamus and Francois's ex fall for each other via Florence Nightingale syndrome. Francois and unemployed Brendan search for the chupacabra. This happens. Don't worry, he's fine. Henri forces Kenna to marry unemployed Brendan, who becomes employed again as Master of Horse and Hound magazine. Germaine's engagement falls through because no one knows how to knock anymore. Riley is shipped off to the military and Germaine accepts Castleroy's proposal. Don't screw this up.
I'm sorry, I thought you just said you wanted a pay rise.
I did. We want more money and better working conditions.
Is this some sort of peasant joke that I'm too rich to understand?
Why does Catherine de Medici call her ladies a flying squad in a pre-aviation era? Anyway, Mary invites some Scots to court to carry some secret information. Catherine gets hers and finds out the plan. Murdering all the Scots. Mary finds out and blackmails her. Susan gets engaged to Lord Julian and tells him she's preggo. He's okay with it. Kenna and Brendan overcome their differences.
Hey! This emergency exit is painted on!
There's no way out! There's no way out! We're doomed! Doomed!
We've got another bastard at court, and this time it's the Earl of Moray. Marie de Guise has been ousted by the Scottish Protestants. Mary de Guise has been ousted by Scottish Protestants. I don't know, this is hard. Too many T's. Mary intends to go back to Scotland to help, but Francois doesn't trust Moray and locks Mary in a tower. Susan marries Julian and Nostradamus has to send Francois's ex away to prevent yet another prophecy from coming true. Kenna and Catherine work together to get rid of the chav. 1 month later, still snowing, definitely Canada. Mary gets the Duc de Guise to try and help her mother. He only agrees so long as he becomes Francois's right hand when he becomes king. Francois decides to placate his father's animosity towards England by attacking Calais and uses the Duke's army instead. Catherine convinces the chav to serve her instead. Germaine's father shows up and treats his daughter like trash. Castleroy puts him in his place, endearing him to Germaine.
I can't thank you enough.
No need to thank me. Everyone deserves a chance to find happiness. Just as I have.
Oh, can I marry him?
It's over, Anakin! I have the high ground!
Francois leads a ragtag band of soldiers to get rid of the English blockade surrounding Calais. Riley is in the group and Francois promises to reward him with land and wealth so he can marry the woman he loves. Meanwhile, Mary has Catherine kidnapped and frames her cousin who happened to be there, using her soldiers to protect Scotland. Julian nearly runs off with Susan's money but changes his mind at the last minute.
Long live the king.
Turns out Julian's a phony who stole the identity of the real Julian, who died. He and Susan part ways as they fake his death again. At least now her baby has a name. Calais has been conquered off screen and Mary I of England is dead. Huh, that was a fast 8 months. Francois tries to quell his father's madness by taking him on a hunting trip. Oh boy, only good things can come from that.
Don't butt me!
Brendan finds a boy while hunting for the chupacabra. Kenna is the only one who can get him to talk. Brendan and Nostradamus decide to hunt the chupacabra together.
No more children, no more sacrifices, and the slaughter of innocence ends here.
He said it!
Henri has really lost it. He plans to poison Francois to marry Mary and conquer England. Francois realises his father is beyond help and takes Lord Montgomery's place in the infamous joust that kills Henri. Germaine still rejects Riley, although she is relieved when she finds out he wasn't killed in an explosion. Riley is a bag of garbage and makes Germaine feel guilty for her selflessness. What does he think this is? Mulan 2? Brendan and Nostradamus kill the Chupacabra, who happens to be just some guy. Susan goes into labour on the way back to court and has to contact Mary, who comes clean to Francois about the child's real father. Just as they're about to go to her, news arrives that the plague has broken out. Francois leaves anyway, while Mary orders the castle gates shut.
Wait. You look familiar. Haven't I seen you somewhere before?
I'm told I look like the Dauphin of France. Only taller.
Some have argued that it's easier to watch this series when you pretend that this isn't meant to be actual history, and just an alternate reality where dresses are hideous and things don't have consequences. The only way I can perceive that possibility is through Lola. You guys know how Chronicles of Narnia ends, right? All the Pevensies apart from Susan, along with Diggory, Eustace, Polly and Jill all die in a train crash and go to Aslan's country. Spoilers for like a 70-year-old book, by the way. This leaves Susan alone in the world. Maybe to understand the sudden traumatic loss of her siblings, she started believing in Narnia again and wondered how she could get back. She goes and finds the rings from the magician's nephew and went to look for Narnia. However, she couldn't find it again because Narnia wasn't there anymore. It was destroyed at the end of the last battle. She found herself trapped in this alternate Earth and, like Julian, decided to steal the identity of a girl named Lola Fleming and went to serve a queen instead of be a queen. And that's literally the only logical explanation. A lot of the show creators' explanations for numerous inaccuracies come off as mere excuses, saying, oh, we're just trying to get in a younger audience, we're just trying to appeal to a younger demographic that's not interested in history. And when I see that excuse, I'm like, bitch, I was of the target audience for this when it came out. I was 18, the age that the characters were supposed to be. And I was obsessed with history back then, especially this time period. When you try to shut out the history that the show's based on from the narrative, you can sort of, in your own weird way, enjoy it. I say sort of because I hate all the bollocks around the love triangle. I say love triangle, I mean the whole romantic tension between Francois, Sebastian and Mary, but there are other factors in there too, because Mary seems to create some form of conflict of interest with all of her ladies apart from Amy, who dies. It is kind of the same situation that I found myself in when I was doing when I was looking at becoming Elizabeth, where whenever we focus on the politics and the scheming, that's the fun part, because even watching Mary playing the Game of Thrones is quite fun to watch, because hey, she's playing the game a lot better than Ned Stark ever did. But every time you see Sebastian or Francois get jealous because Mary's kissing one or the other, you just go, oh god, just move on. But the thing is, back in 2013, love triangles were a huge thing, especially in YA stuff, because back then we were on the last gasps of Team Edward and Team Jacob, and Hunger Games had just become a thing because the movies had come out. The books were still popular, but the movies obviously propelled it to high circumstances, and then a lot of copiers just went on and kept doing the love triangle. But it was because of the love triangle shit that I didn't really like Sebastian until he was married to Kenna. Changing some of the characters' names sort of makes sense. We have about 5 Marys, plus the off-screen Bloody Mary. The Duc de Guise was also named Francois, so they changed his name to Christian. I keep referring to Henry II using the French pronunciation simply to avoid confusion, because if I say Henry and Catherine repeatedly, there are 3 other notable pairs that'll just trip me up in my note-taking. Having seen the Vanessa Redgrave film before watching this series, calling Francis Francois was something that just sort of stuck. Mary's ladies-in-waiting are based on the real-life Mary Stuart's 4 Marys. They came from the most noble families in Scotland and were sent to France with Mary when they were all quite young, and they grew up together. Their renames are kind of baffling, as they sound like they should be in a teen drama set in Oakland, California or something. Kenna is the only one that can reasonably make sense because that is a Scottish name, but surely that was a coincidence. If they were going to rename them, I give them old-fashioned names, but then they can shorten them into more appealing nicknames that teenagers would usually do anyway. So Kenna could be Catherine and be called Kate or Kitty. Greer could be Griselda, but have that shortened to Zelda. Lola could be Lettice or Letty, and Ailey could just be called Anna. I called her Amy because she falls down the stairs and no one knows if it was an accident or not, just like another Amy we should know about. Was that so difficult? Another element about the younger characters is that they have all been aged up so they can have more mature storylines and to make them more appealing to their target audience. Originally, their ages range from 13 to 16. In the series, their ages are never mentioned, but you can reasonably assume they're meant to be 17 to 19. You wouldn't find Francois so sexy if you found out he was 2 years younger than Mary, significantly shorter than her, and his balls never dropped. Plus, it would look substantially creepy if Kenna, who was based on the 16-year-old Mary Livingston, was being pursued by a then 38-year-old King Henri II. I mean, the age difference is still an ick factor in the season, and pretty much everyone and their mothers tries to tell Kenna that this is a bad idea. But they do get the point across in the arc that Henri is using Kenna for his own satisfaction, and Kenna thought she was more mature than she actually was. Because this is one of the better story arcs, I don't mind that Kenna's been aged up. This is starkly different from the likes of Young Bess and Becoming Elizabeth, where there actually was a historic case of sexual abuse towards a minor who was in his care, which was then later rewrote in Young Bess and Becoming Elizabeth to be a more romantic relationship. So thank God we didn't get that here.
That's the king. That's King Henry, but is that Catherine?
No, they're still waiting on her.
That's Diane de Poitiers, the king's mistress.
I said this back in my vlogs, but I really do think that the actors whom they got to play these characters was a huge help in getting through the season. Because, as I said, if we were in the same boat that we were in the CBS Titanic, where they cast a bunch of people who couldn't act and literally only 2 cast members had good acting chops, then it would be an absolute ball ache to get through. So for the main cast in Reign, there's a mix of Canadian, American, British and Australian actors. The main cast being Mary, her ladies, Francois, Sebastian, Henri II and Catherine de Medici. To be honest, Anna Popplewell did feel a little bit wooden sometimes, and Janessa Grant, because she got killed off in episode 8, she wasn't around long enough and she didn't really do enough for me to really gain an attachment to her character. There were times that I had to sort of double check that Selena Sinden was English, because for the first few episodes her accent sounded a little bit exaggerated, like she was really trying to come off as posh. But when you consider that Greer's character isn't as posh as her friends, and she has to present herself as perfect marriage stock, then it kind of does make sense that she's exaggerating her accent a little bit. As the season went on, I didn't really notice it that much. But that's the only gripe I had with the acting. I at least got the sense of a show that wanted to be taken seriously, and more importantly, made sure it got more seasons. The actors bounce off each other really well and sell you on the idea that these people have known each other for several years. Having seen a lot of Mary Queen of Scots performances in anticipation of a rankings list, I have to admit that Adelaide Kane's version ranks higher than a lot of others, but I won't say exactly why so you can have more eagerness for when that video comes. I'll have to have watched the entire show before that happens. At the moment, Mary comes off as a reasonably intelligent person who has to make a lot of difficult decisions at the cost of her own conscience. She sees Catherine de Medici as the type of queen she does not want to be, feared and hated, but this may be her fate after all. Honestly, given how many bad decisions the real Mary made that led to her downfall, I worry that they'll have to dumb down the show's Mary quite a bit when it comes to season 4. Maybe Tyrion Lannister can point her to a good pharmacist that sells idiot pills. Speaking of Catherine de Medici, by God, the best part of the entire show was Megan Follow's performance as the queen of fuck around and find out. There are multiple instances in the show where she just literally walks in, steals the scene and pieces out again. They even included that Catherine was quite short. Now, I didn't grow up with Green Gables, I haven't read it, I haven't seen any of the adaptations, especially not the 1980s adaptation in which Megan Follows played the title character. Even though in practically every Jacqueline Wilson novel, especially the ones that came out when I was about 11, 12-ish, she would usually have like a 2-page tangent where the older character and the main characters would just talk about a stack of classic novels as a way of trying to convince the readers to go and seek these novels for themselves. I read The Secret Garden when I was 14. That was it. I tried to read Little Women twice. Once when I was 10, another time when I was 21, and I just couldn't get through it. I just found it was so boring. I'm sorry. I'm gonna get killed now. So this is the first and only thing I've seen Megan Follows in. But she is pretty awesome. I know nothing is sacred to Disney anymore, and they're going to go ahead with that Snow White remake anyway, but if they haven't cast the White Queen yet, can we please, just perfect casting. Come on. I think Torrance Coombs' performance in The Tudors really left an impression on me, because I was prone to really not liking Sebastian throughout the season. Sebastian is kind of how you might write Culpeper if he was actually a romantic hero and not a massive wanker. I love how in the pilot Diane de Poitiers outright tells her son that no good will come from lusting after Mary, because remember what happened last time. I should point out right now that Sebastian never existed. Although Diane was Henri's favourite mistress, they never had any children. I eventually warmed to him towards the end when his feelings for Kenna started to become more genuine. One of my favourite scenes is when Henri's chav mistress demands Kenna's wedding ring. It's not only humiliating for Kenna, but the ring belonged to Sebastian's grandmother, and he stands up to his father about it. Then Henri forces Catherine to replace it with one of her own rings. Catherine seems to have empathy for humiliated women, so lets her keep the ring after Henri and the chav have gone, but Kenna makes sure to get the original ring back at the end of the episode. I preferred Toby Regbo's Francois over Torrance Coombs' Sebastian as a suitor for Mary, not just because history dictated that they were going to get together in the end, but because he's willing to make the tough choices and the sacrifices and come off as the bad guy for the greater good. He can see the bigger picture much better than Mary can. He distrusts Moray in France, and he's willing to put a man on the rack and lock Mary in a tower, even if she'll hate him for doing that. Before he marries Mary, he's uncertain if their marriage is going to go through, and he tries to distance himself from her. So if they don't get married and she goes off and marries someone else, it won't be so painful when she leaves. But he just can't help falling for her because she's just that awesome in his eyes. I think my favourite moments are when she takes the reins in a situation, he lets her, and he just watches her the whole time, and he just worships her. Like, there is no toxic masculinity to be found here. A little bit of immaturity, but then these guys are supposed to be teenagers, so I guess it makes sense. The scene where she appeals for the aid of her countrymen, and they all lay their swords at her feet, is only made sweeter when you see Francois smiling in admiration of her, like, she's such a goddess. I worship her. Alan van Sprang's Henri II gave me vibes of Jonathan Rhys-Meyer's Henry VIII in The Tudors, with less shouting and more cruelty. He may have gleaned influence when he was on the show as Francis Bryan, the courtier who lost an eye in a joust and had an eye patch for the rest of his life. For the first few episodes, it took me a while to recognise him with two eyes. Oops, never mind then.
Ironic.
I think his madness arc did come a bit too quickly, as there was a sudden switch from him becoming the main antagonist instead of Catherine. His best scene is towards the end of the season when, in a brief moment of respite, he tells Francois about his childhood.
It was my father who taught me to push hard. Oh, he expected a great deal from his sons. Did you know he was captured by the Spaniards? I was 6 or 7 at the time. They imprisoned him in Madrid under the cruelest conditions. One day my brother and I were taken to visit him. He saw a boat and he ran to us. I ran to him. He passed us by and jumped in the boat. We'd been traded as hostages for his freedom.
Why did he let that happen?
He was the one who arranged it.
And this actually did happen in history. It's a good way of revealing it. Rossif Sutherland as Nostradamus was an odd character, to put it lightly. Yes, he is the son of Donald Sutherland, but he does bear a striking resemblance to Liam Hemsworth. It is because of this series that Sutherland and Selena Sinden met and got married. He is the only one in the cast to put on an accent, although I couldn't tell you what accent that's trying to be. The real Nostradamus was French. Olivia Francois X does have a French accent that's authentic because the actress herself was part French. Nostradamus mostly serves Catherine, but he later falls for Olivia and tries to leave with her. Only Catherine puts a black mamba in Olivia's luggage and he makes her leave without him. He later teams up with Sebastian to hunt the darkness for Olivia's sake. One of his most famous predictions is the death of Henri II through the joust, but in the show he never makes that prediction. You'd think if he'd told Catherine about that, she wouldn't have had to keep trying to poison her husband. Yeah, the accent thing. The accent thing can be a bit of a distraction for history nuts. Most European period pieces, even the ones that aren't set in Britain, usually have the entire cast speak in English accents, or more specifically, the kind of accent that I'm doing right now. So this is my normal accent. It's sort of like posh East Midlands, although some have mistaken it for a London accent. My mum lived in London for a little bit. I just sound like her, basically, even though she was born in Wales. But this is a kind of voice that you would usually expect in one of those dramas. Sometimes, like in Marie Antoinette, they have a range of English and American accents. Or sometimes someone might come in and they'll have an accent appropriate to the place that they're in. Mary Queen of Scots and her ladies, they would have in real life had French accents because all 5 of them grew up at the court of France. So every time we see Mary Queen of Scots with a Scottish accent, it's kind of a red flag as to how little research was done. But in the context of Reign, Mary's been at a convent in France for a while, so yeah. But Ailey, Lola, Kenna and Greer, while Mary has been in the convent, have been in Scotland, and then they arrive at the start of the series at the French court. But all of them have English accents, they don't sound Scottish whatsoever. Catherine de Medici is Italian, but her voice doesn't sound any different from Henri's or Francois'. In a lot of these sorts of period pieces, you only really get 2 types of English accent, because there's a huge range of accents. Like, if you've seen any of our domestic television, you'll know. So, for the plebs, they all speak in Cockney accents, gavna.
Consider yourself at home. Consider yourself one of the family.
The toffs all have like a southeast, distinguished, educated sort of voice. Sometimes I do dip into my Nottingham accent. Hey up, me duck. Let's go down pit and get a cob, you mardy bum. There are other accents like Geordie and Brummie and Scouse and West Country and tons of others. Oh, and you rarely get a Welsh accent unless the character is actually Welsh.
You lesbian, are you, love?
That's right. We just off to Swansea now for a massive layers off.
And with Scottish accents, they're a bit tricky. So the only reason I can find as to why there isn't a broader range of accents in most of these dramas is because American audiences tend to complain, or just executives themselves, they complain that other English accents just are unintelligible. They don't know what we're saying.
Right. What did he say?
I got this comment a couple times when I was a camp counsellor in America. And of course I do speak quite quickly and sometimes you might struggle hearing what I say. Like, apparently when they were filming Wallace and Gromit Curse of the Were-Rabbit, DreamWorks went to Aardman and said, we need you to re-record the voices because all these Yorkshire accents are hard for us to understand. You even get a few British YouTubers who actually put on voices kind of like mine, so they're better understood. Sometimes I would like a variety in accents, kind of like in Death of Stalin, because in that one it's also made sense for like people to have Cockney accents and American accents and other sorts of accents, because Russia's a huge place and these are people from like all different parts of the Soviet Union. But yeah, on the bright side, at least this one didn't give Mary Queen of Scots a Scottish accent. Sometimes we do get Scots in there with Scottish accents, but she didn't have one. I guess it's because they probably didn't want to have to pay for the cost of giving these 5 girls training to do Scottish accents if they were worried they weren't going to get another season. First season woes, you know?
Blood for Ball! Blood for Ball! Blood for Ball! Now who's laughing? Now who's laughing?
You may wonder why the French royal family decide to live right next door to a forest where a bloodthirsty cult regularly kidnaps people and sacrifices them. Is this the show's attempt at White Walkers? As the show is seriously lacking in terms of world building, yes, even when you base it in our world, you still need world building, the cult is just referred to as pagan. Pagan this and pagan that. Paganism is not an organised religion unto itself. It is a term given to many religions that don't follow the same religious beliefs as Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism or Sikhism, which are the main 6 religions in the world. Pagan religions usually include that of Wicca, Druidry, Norse and polytheistic, among many others, including Satanism, although Satanism isn't actually what you might think it is, it's just a parody of Christianity. I don't know. I should know this, I took philosophy and ethics for A-level, but it was awful. I've had actual pagans in the comment section of my vlogs criticise this element of the show repeatedly. Imagine if you swapped out pagan for Christian every time they say, this is a pagan totem, this is a pagan word. Well, like, what if they said, oh, this is a Christian totem, this is a Christian word? And it's just like, well, what do you mean it's a Christian word? Does that mean Aramaic? Is it Latin? And what do you mean that's a Christian totem? Do you mean a crucifix? When it's really just 2 twigs and a couple of feathers tied together. But to the show creators, paganism was just about as other as they wanted to go, and threw in some blood sacrifices. My god, this show is really lucky it was not set in America, because I cannot imagine how they would portray, oh, there's these pagans that live in the woods, they just completely misrepresent whichever regional indigenous tribe happened to be in that area. That could have been so problematic. Their beliefs and actions remind me of the Silent Hill cult. It is revealed at the end of the season that the darkness performs human sacrifice to prevent disasters, which had been predicted on the walls of his lair. And when Sebastian kills the darkness, these disasters start happening. If I may be the Agent Scully here, said disasters do have logical explanations. The meteor shower, for one, which is interpreted as the stars falling from the sky, can easily be predicted through astronomy, because even the ancient Maya could predict eclipses right down to when they were going to happen. And an outbreak of the plague seemed inevitable, as the country had just been at war. And after wars, people return home carrying diseases and it spreads into their communities. Maybe it was meant to be ambiguous. I don't care, let's not waste any more time on this segment.
What was that? I've heard that whistle before. It's the darkness! Guards!
This is the worst assignment we've ever had.
Worse than the time we were attacked by the flesh-eating virus?
Francis!
No, this is much more irritating. I've seen enough, Mulder. Let's go.
I mean, it literally looked like toilet paper caught in a windstorm.
Where do I start? You basically took a checklist of everything that can turn tacky. Shiny, short, tight.
Bridesmaids under the sea. I mean, hello? Slutty, slutty, slutty. No. There's nothing right about this dress. The only possible accessory that she could use with this is a wand.
You're a mess just standing. So, I mean, traveling, you're gonna just be like a homeless person.
Unless you are going to a Joan Crawford St. Patty's Day party. I mean, who is wearing this blouse?
She looks like a Victorian cocktail waitress in Las Vegas.
So y'all knew I was going to talk about the costumes, didn't you? In my vlogs, because the dresses in this show were... I tended to do a worst dress award for each of them. Because there was no effort, like they freely admitted this, there was no effort at all in trying to recreate mid-16th century Renaissance dresses. My criticism mainly falls on the main 5 girls because they're the ones we see the most, and they change their dresses like 3 or 4 times in a single episode. The male costumes worn by Francois, Henri and Sebastian are kind of indicative of the baggy shirts and gaudy doublets of the era, and they wear a lot of chains and fur cloaks, and that, but from the waist down they all wear anachronistic leather trousers, so there's no stockings or anything like that, or pumpkin breeches, along with sexy riding boots. And I'm a riding enthusiast, therefore all riding boots are sexy. For Mary and the gang, the majority of their costumes were sourced second-hand from wherever they could find them. This is why they've been referred to as Wish.com bridesmaid dresses. I bet some of them actually are second-hand bridesmaid dresses, and yes, they are quite hideous. They vary in style, cut and fabric quality. As I work in theatre costuming and I've become more enthusiastic about textiles, I've come to see what fabrics are better than others. And most of these dresses look like fast fashion. Sometimes you can see bra straps and zippers, hinting that these actresses are not decked out in the full undergarments and could easily switch out their costume and put on the next one between scenes. Thankfully, in a lot of the snowy episodes, they are mostly wearing cloaks to cover their dresses, so you don't have to keep looking at them so much. One of my biggest peeves was when they were wearing strapless dresses, because it just tells you how little they care about the aesthetic of the time period. You can find fashion blogs online from when the series first came out, and they are showing stills from certain episodes where you can find like belts and jewellery and the actual dresses in actual places. And sometimes for exorbitant prices, like who the hell pays £800 for a belt? What's it made of? Dragon scales? Sorry, I'm a recycling person. Recycle or make it yourself. So clearly these costumes had relevance to fashion trends at the time. But the problem is, as the season goes on, and fashions change, you end up with a show that has a series of costumes that are not only historically inaccurate, but horribly dated in terms of current fashion trends. Catherine's costumes have a distinct style to them at least. Yeah, they're still not accurate, but she indulges in lots of reds and purples and they suit her complexion as well. Kind of like a Bowden mum who will slit your throat if you cross her. As she's widowed by the end of the season, I wonder if she'll be wearing black for the rest of the show, because that's what Catherine de Medici did after Henri II died. She just wore black for the rest of her life, and Queen Victoria totally copied. But I doubt they're going to do this. Oh god, I'm cold again. I'm cold again, I'm putting this back on. I love it when a show or film uses costumes to emphasise the character growth or the themes of their story. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, for one, did this a lot with their costumes. Especially for the character of Willow, who went from guarded nerd who covered herself up to amazing lesbian witch. If I was in charge of the costuming for this series and I had the budget to sort of play around with how I would do it, I would make all 5 of them arrive, like Mary and her ladies, arrive at the court all wearing white. And as the season develops, the colours go slowly from white to an individual colour that represents each of them. As Ailey dies early on, I would probably have her still in pale orange, because she is wearing sort of a pale orangey dress as when she dies. But orange is a symbol for optimistic youth, so it sort of shows she died with that youth and optimism that never really died. Greer would start wearing green because her story arc is centred around money. Kenna would go from white to pale pink to salmon to cerise, and maybe even fuchsia at the end. And her maturity in her relationships reflect how deep the pink goes. Lola, I think, would wear blue. She would wear French blue because she's pregnant with Francois's baby. And Mary's wardrobe should start to emulate that of Catherine de Medici. Also, I just want to keep Mary Queen of Scots in red because of the whole she wore red to her execution. That was a huge point in her story arc. So she would probably start wearing pink like Kenna, but then she and Kenna would diverge and she would start wearing red, and she would start dressing a lot more like Catherine de Medici, as she has to start thinking and acting like her to not only outsmart her, but just to survive in this court. And don't tell me the girls would not be interested in historical costuming. Girls who are interested in costumes, they love historical fashion. They love the fabrics and the designs, even if some of the designs aren't too accurate, but accurate enough.
Hey, how do we get back? No problem. We'll just circle around like those kids in the Blair Witch Project. I must be getting close. I recognize that girl.
If, like me, you enjoy reading fantasy novels like these, you'll know that ones that are set in a fictional world tend to have a little map on the inside to show the layout of this place. So when you're reading along, so say I'm in the middle of reading The Tombs of Atuan, and for a moment I can't actually remember where Sparrowhawk's Island is, but then you're like, oh right, there it is, and then there's Atuan right there. Especially if during the events of the story these characters are going on a really long journey across the world, it's good to keep track of where they are. I honestly needed a map when watching this first season, because I have no idea where anything is. I know it's in France, but where in France? The geography was really inconsistent and made no sense. Most of the first season was filmed on sets in Canada, but there are also exterior shots from Ashford Castle in Ireland. Ashford is on the edge of a massive lake known as Loch Corrib, a very popular beauty spot in the Irish countryside. The castle is almost 800 years old, which at least provides a good exterior, but the inclusion of the massive lake throws off the geography. It feels as though the world building of Reign was someone's first draft. They stay in one place and call it the castle. It is never called anything else. It takes a day or two to get to Paris, and there is a nearby unnamed village and a dungeon for criminals. This gives the location more of a fairy tale vibe, but as this is a real series of events we're talking about, I need names. The inclusion of the lake confused me especially. In the show it is never acknowledged as a lake or the sea, although in episode 3, Thomas has a ship docked close to the castle, and the two of them ride out to the coast, and back in a single day. But in episode 9, Mary and Sebastian have been on the run for 10 days and haven't made it anywhere near the coast. So where the hell are they? How am I supposed to know where everyone is without a point of reference? Now, in Tudor dramas set in England, they mostly stick to one location because of costs. So they usually build one set and that's where everything takes place. Also because of literary shorthand. So things that might have happened in Hampton Court or Richmond Palace, they might be moved to Westminster or Greenwich. I understand that. I just wish that when they film these they would find more interesting places to film in other than Pensters Place and Hatton Hall. I like those places, don't get me wrong, but when you use the same place over and over again and say it's a different place, I'm just like, guys, look at a National Trust book sometime. The castle itself doesn't seem to be an ideal location to be the centre of the French government. I mean, I say that and Versailles was really far away from Paris, but this was before Versailles. You gotta remember, it's before Versailles. We're 200 years away from Versailles. Because the benefit of putting a palace close to the capital meant an easier commute, because the courtiers don't actually live in the palace. They live nearby in their townhouses and they get to and fro by river or by coach. But I guess in the context of the series, everyone is just sort of living in this castle in the middle of nowhere. If that massive lake is supposed to be the sea, it's quite short-sighted for the royal family to live right next to what would be probably the English Channel, where the English can just rock up and there's no walls in front of the castle, fire their cannons, boom, we took the castle. How did we lose Calais again? And the only way to travel to and from this place is to go by horse right next to a wood where people live, and they will come out and they will trick you into going into the wood if you don't know the location very well, and you'll get murdered by pagans. Because again, in the Tudor dramas, they remember that a lot of the historical royal palaces are right on the edge of the Thames, which makes easy transport. I wish they could have made a scale model of the Louvre or the Chateau de Fontainebleau and just be clever with green screening and just say, oh yeah, this is where it is. That way I'd at least know where everyone is and I can keep track of where people are going.
And nothing else matters.
I don't think this season needed to be 22 episodes long. I say it would have neatly fitted into 12 or 13 maximum. This would have cut out a lot of unnecessary storylines that try to heighten tension to a point where you think, oh crap, how are they going to get out of this? And then they just sort of explain things happened off screen, boom, next storyline. They really tried to draw out Francois and Mary's wedding until at least just past the halfway point, so they had to make tons of all of this love triangle bollocks and it just doesn't work. So they artificially extended this by killing off Ailey. But then later on in the season it's a little strange when Kenna, Lola, Greer and Mary are having snowball fights, or they're getting married, or some stuff like that, and they just don't mention Ailey at all. She's just completely forgotten about. Like, imagine if that had happened in, well, I say imagine if that happened in Buffy, like that happens in the very first episode, but they just don't sit around and be like, oh, I wish Ailey could have been here. Oh, I couldn't get my hair right. Oh, I needed Ailey to help me with my hair. It's like, that poor girl didn't even get a funeral. It just shows how little they cared about her. Even though Nostradamus over there knows full well that Clarissa is the one that killed Ailey in order to trick Mary into believing into Nostradamus's prophecies, he does not tell Mary. She might have remembered that when she had to cave in Clarissa's skull with a rock. And let's not forget the bastard of Portugal in episodes 3 and 4. It was another excuse to draw out Mary and Francois' romance until they eventually got married. And there are a lot of people who are familiar with Portuguese history in my comment section during those episodes when I did the vlogs. They were not happy. I do struggle to get into long TV shows like this because there's just so many to keep track of, and sometimes you just don't really like how these character arcs are playing out. And you forget about characters, and then that means they have to do really long recaps at the start of every episode just so you remember who this and that and whatever. It's why I'm not a Trekkie, okay? I watched the first 2 episodes of Next Generation, but then I realised you got 26 episodes in each season and they're all an hour long. I just don't think I'm ready for that kind of commitment. At least the last 2 seasons are a little bit shorter. You're right there, Alan. It's alright, I'm nearly finished. What? I could have addressed other elements of this series, like the bad fight choreography that reminds you of Liam Neeson climbing over a fence, the odd choices of music, no one knows how to dance, and how picky I am about the riding scenes, but most of that was already covered in my vlogs. I'd say one of the best elements of the show, or at least season 1 in general, because I don't know how the rest plays out, is it has great representation of female friendship and, to another extent, found family. Because remember, Mary and her ladies have been sent away from very young ages to live away from their families, away from their home countries, and live in a foreign place where pretty much everyone's out to get them. So they have to rely on each other for emotional support, and they trust each other with their secrets. I don't really like those teen dramas where the female characters are always at each other's throats. They're always competing over something. There's always a not like other girls aspect to it. Thankfully, that's not here. So, now this is over, let's go and jump straight into season 2. So season 2 is about the Valois versus the Bourbons. It's alright, I brought Bourbon. I'll be fine. Come on, Alan. Let's wrap this up. We've got another episode of Blood, Sex and Royalty to watch. Right, that was season 1 of Reign. Whew. I hope it won't take me this long to get through season 2. I'll probably do a little post about how I feel about each episode, or I'll just put it on my Discord. Yeah, thanks for watching this video with me, and the dress stayed up the entire time. I mean, I had to work a few tricks to get this to stay up, but it worked. I mean, I'm wearing a bra underneath, and I'm wearing my corset. So if you're wondering why this dress in particular, I thought, well, a lot of the main characters in Reign are wearing what look like prom dresses, and this is my prom dress from 2013, the year it would have come out, the year Reign came out. So what do you think? 10 years later, it still fits. Although trying to contain the twins is a little hard work. I got a lot of attention that night. Thanks for watching this video with me, and we'll go on to season 2 right away. It'd be a much welcome break from watching Blood, Sex and Royalty, believe you me. So thank you to my patrons who have been supporting this channel and are amazing at it. You guys are great. So if you can, please support the channel on Patreon. Thank you so much, Alison Cuff, Jill Nero, Larissa and Leslie Williams. And also make sure you subscribe to the channel, because I could always do with some more subscribers. I kind of want to get to 6,000 subscribers by the end of April, if possible. So subscribe, get me to that. We'll do a book review. Whew. What do you say, Alan? We done good? We done good.